And one of the problems with the standard language learning methodologies is that, one, they take way longer. I mean, when I'm sure that Neachet has already told you guys, you know, the name of this is accelerated second language acquisition, and it's really important to understand that this really does accelerate the learning. How it accelerates how fast you learn this whatever language you're studying. The irony here about the language department not wanting to give Neachet any kind of like language certification for what he's doing is that if they were using this methodology to be teaching French, their kids would be exponentially more fluent in French by the end of their first semester than they are, I would guess, at the end of like 4 semesters of French, because the standard methodology isn't set up to actually teach you how to speak. It's only set up to prepare you to go to speak later when you go into a fluent community somewhere else. So, for example, my mother was a language major here, and she studied French, Russian, and Chinese, and she didn't actually attain, even though French was like her major, she didn't actually attain any kind of fluency in French until she went to France. And then, I mean, like, my mother was, or my mother, not her mother, jokes, it's our mother. My mother was really, really proficient in learning languages, like incredibly, she was just gifted in that way. And even after 4 semesters of French, and reading in French, and writing in French, she still was not a fluent speaker. You know, like, think about the amount of hours that she put into trying to learn French, and then it wasn't until she went and actually lived in France for 6 months that she attained any kind of fluency, you know. And the reason I'm talking about that is because for most endangered indigenous languages, you cannot do that. There's nowhere for you to go. And in fact, we're actually incredibly lucky because so much of our confederacy is actually in Canada, and there are more speakers in Canada than there are in the US. But if we were the only group of Nichitapi in the world, we would be this close to just total erasure of our language. Like, we're actually lucky that we have speakers in Canada that we can refer back to, because right now I don't know if people at home, I don't know that they understand how serious the situation actually is, you know. So I've taken Spanish, I've taken Latin, I've taken French, using standard methodologies, and when I say standard, basically I mean like you're learning through using English, and you're reading and writing and you're memorizing. And I tried to take Blackfoot in my mid-20s when I was working with a fluent speaker from Canada at home on the Blackfoot reservation, and he and I worked for a couple months together and got absolutely nowhere. And we hit a point where we realized that, like, he just wasn't going to be able to teach me the language, and it was an incredibly frustrating thing for both of us. And the biggest problem was that he didn't have any, I mean, this is a guy who didn't speak English until he was 7 years old, you know, and didn't move down to the US until he was a lot older. And it's a guy he's one of those, I mean, I'm sure that, like, your communities and maybe, have people like this, you know. He was one of those guys who was a fluent speaker who had studied his own language as a speaker, you know, if that makes sense to you. I mean, I've met very few people who had a better understanding of the Blackfoot language than him, and he just did not know how to teach it to me. And at that point, because you can't, like, it's like what Neachet was showing you guys earlier today. You have no idea how effective that is. You have no idea how much you would learn if you had just 4 to 6 more hours of this. You would know more. You would know more in Arapaho than you do, you know, in your own languages, unless you're a fluent speaker right now. And that's a little bit embarrassing, right? And I feel like we should feel a little bit embarrassed, because it'll push us to work a little harder to, you know, work on our respective languages. But when Haley says that I was talking to Haley the other night, she says she's in the other Blackfoot language class. We figured out how many hours she has spent between those 2 semesters, and I think it was like something like 90 some hours of instruction versus our, what are we at right now, 20?
20 something.
20 hours?
It was more than twice as much.
It was, I mean, it's
more.
over 3 times as much time in the other language classes what she spent in our class. And like you heard what she said, she already has a better understanding of the language. So when he says accelerated, it's not a joke. And when it comes to indigenous languages that are endangered, we don't have any time, frankly. You know, there's just no time. We can't wait for like somebody 2 generations from now to show up and say, all right, we're going to do this, because 2 generations from now, there's nothing's going to be left for some of us.